Hi everyone, welcome along to this evening's Women's Infrastructure Network event, which is sponsored by Higgins Contractors. So this is a partial online, partial in-person event due to COVID restrictions. So thanks for understanding for the few last minute changes that had to be made to how we are actually going to bring this event to you tonight. So this evening we have the pleasure of having Fiona Deehan here with us. So Fiona is the CEO of Deehan Leadership Collaborative, and Fiona is a great friend of mine, and we often have great long chats and talk about all the things going on in the world and how we're going to change the world, the two of us. And I had a moment during one of our great chats where I was like, I can't keep this woman to myself. I have to share her with everybody. So I said, let's bring her along here and share your wisdom with everybody here that we have tonight. So please feel free to add questions throughout the event, and we'll go through them at the end. And if you prefer, you can ask them anonymously, whatever suits best. So I'll pass it over to Fiona to get started.
Thanks, Orla. Thanks a million. What a lovely introduction. Isn't it lovely to have a friend like that to say nice things about you? Just call you up every now and again. Can you just say some nice things? That'd be lovely. So yeah, thank you for a lovely introduction. And such a pity that I don't get to have you all here in person in the room. But the joys of the world that we're in at the moment. And so I'll do my best to kind of address both the room and those of you that have joined us online. So yeah. Okay, well, let's crack on into things. Wait, I'll grab my mouse, make sure I have everything I need. And Orla, if I'm rambling on too much time-wise, just let me know. Because what time have we now? Just 5:05. Yeah. So I'll probably aim for about 45 minutes to an hour with questions and stuff in there as well. And yeah, we'll have plenty of time for questions at the end anyway, too.
Sounds good.
Okay, well, let's crack on into it. So I'll just... Well, yeah, there we go. So just Orla introduced me there, but it's quite weird just looking straight back up at myself on the slides again. But ko Fiona toku ingoa no airangi ahau no Cork ahau no airangi o kutipuna kai otatahi toku kainga inaine. De hui recorda Fiona Sandam is as Corkig in Erin me ach ta me imachoni otatahi inish. So that second language is Irish. And yeah, so I guess if you hadn't guessed already, and from Orla's introduction, I'm Irish. I've been here 11 years in Otatahi in Christchurch. Came here on a working holiday visa, and well, the rest is history. From a work perspective, I'm an accredited Clifton Strengths coach, and I work with a range of individuals and teams, and love just helping people learn about and leverage their natural talents, and so that they can realize their potential in their work, within their roles, in their relationships, and that helps their well-being as well. So I just love helping people perform, and I genuinely believe everyone has what they need within them. So it's really just about helping them see that and getting that out of them. I also do gigs like this, you know, presentations and speaking gigs around leadership, well-being, strengths-based development, that kind of stuff. And finally, I kind of do some work as a consultant and a facilitator on some community and corporate leadership projects here in Christchurch, and yeah, a bit around New Zealand as well. So finger in lots of pies, but ultimately the common thing is people and getting the best out of people. And as I say, I genuinely believe everyone has what they need within them. It's just sometimes providing a little bit of information or asking a question that provides and holds that space for someone to kind of step into that and just have a crack. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. So I thought, well, I'm talking about change today. So, you know, what qualifies me to talk about change? And I thought, as I thought back on my life, and I said, okay, well, let's not go through the whole thing because we'd be here all night. Just thinking back on the last kind of 10 or 11 years of my life, I kind of thought, what is it that the experience that I bring, both personally and professionally, to talk about change and navigating with confidence? And I thought back and I went, oh yeah, you know, think about 2009 global financial crisis. My then boyfriend, now husband, decided, right, working holiday, let's get out of Ireland for a while and see what happens. And we ended up here. And then a year later, We had applications in for a new work visa, because that's what you do after a year and go, oh yeah, we'll stay for another while. And of course, the immigration office was in Cathedral Square. At the time, I was working for Telstra Clear in their contact centre in Radio Network House, which was just around the corner from Latimer Square there. And that was my last day there on the 22nd of February. But that whole situation was another big change point, I guess, in my life, and resulted in a decision to, oh, let's stay for a while and see what happens. And yeah, well, you can see what happened really to a certain extent. But I guess in the following years, you know, experienced quite a bit of workplace change as some of the bigger organizations I worked for merged with others, which gave me, you know, a whole different experience of change in a different setting. And then the big ones, acquired a husband, a mortgage and a child within a couple of years. And don't underestimate the impact those changes have on your life as well. It gives you a whole different perspective on who you are and how you want to show up in the world as well. Returning to work after maternity leave, about, you know, in 2016 as well. I know I left work to have my daughter with one particular perspective and mindset on the world, and returned to work a year later with a very different mindset and perspective on the world, and with a lot of questions as well, by the way, not necessarily navigating that change very much with confidence, but really having to navigate that change and what I taught myself. And then a year later, deciding actually I'm going to leave that permanent employment and for a crack on to a life of contracting and running my own business and that. And I've pretty much been doing that for the last few years. And then, well, we'll all talk about the roller coaster of the last year or two, where we've all dealt with a significant amount of change and uncertainty. And my kind of personal lens on that has been as a small business owner and as an immigrant, because that's presented certain challenges that are quite different to others. And I guess the reason I share this is to show you that I've experienced a lot of change myself, and I've learned from that in lots of different settings, but also to encourage you to think about your own lives. Because I would bet that there's a lot of experiences that you've had, regardless of your age, that you've navigated some pretty difficult stuff, and you've navigated some major life changes already, regardless of your age and stage, and not to underestimate what you already know. And that's a lot of what I'm going to talk about today, is actually, you know, what you have, you know, look at what you've already got to navigate some of these uncertain things. As I say, a range of different kinds of change there. Some of them big intentional decisions, like that one to come on a working holiday was, well, should we go away for a year and see what happens? And then there was lots of little decisions. It was like, you know, a shifting, just small little shifts that ended up suddenly it was here, and then, you know, it was pointing this way, but then the direction of life was this way. Not because of one big one, but lots of little ones. And some of them, yeah, were the big ones, like the child and the husband thing. And then others were changes we didn't actually choose. It was stuff that just happened, and we had to find ways to navigate that and kind of own the decisions that we made moving forward. So what I do know is that regardless of the type of change, whether it's something that you choose or not, or it's something outside of our control, the one thing that we can control is how we respond, how we leverage our own internal resources, how we pay attention to our emotions, and how that influences our thinking and our perspective. So the choices that we make internally about ourselves and how we lead ourselves, they're the ones that generally matter with the outcome that we're going to get, because that's the thing we can control. We can't choose or control the external outcomes, regardless of all the things we put in place. Something else could still change and shift externally. So, you know, the choice, choosing our mindset and our perspective, both on ourselves and on the situation that we're in, is really where our power is, you know, is where our strength comes from. So knowing that, that's where our confidence has to come from within. Because if we're going to rely on it coming from these external things that we have no control over, then, you know, how are we going to actually be confident in those situations? So I guess I'll start with, you know, a bit of what confidence is not. So let's bust a few myths about confidence. So things like being confident means I won't be afraid. Wrong. Confidence and fear coexist, just like courage and fear coexist. So if, nobody's fearless. You may think they are, but they're just probably very good at hiding it. So, you know, we don't, yeah. So yeah, confidence and fear very much can coexist, just like fear and courage can coexist. Being confident means I have all the answers. Confidence is not directly correlated to knowledge or ability. If that was the case, none of us would ever be confident because none of us have all the answers. I have to feel confident to start things. Again, if that was the case, nothing would be started in the world. Sometimes it's just taking that first little step that gives you a little bit of confidence, and then taking that next step that gives you that more bit of confidence. It's not just I'm confident, right, now I'm going to start. It doesn't work like that. Confident people are extroverted and always share their opinion. Now, clearly I'm extroverted. Maybe that's an assumption actually, but I am, yeah. But that is a big assumption to make, that only people who are extroverted and share their opinion are confident. I would be willing to bet that you all know people in your lives who are quiet and maybe are not extroverted, and actually they have plenty of confidence. They just don't need to be the ones to share their opinion. That's not to say that those of us that are extroverted are masking something, but sometimes that is the case. Sometimes the voice that shouts the loudest is actually not the most confident in the room, and that's maybe hiding something. So I think it's really important that we kind of separate those things from each other, that confidence does not mean that someone is a particular way. Only achieving big things will give me confidence. And I think I spoke to that just a little bit, talking about small steps. No, sometimes it can be just the little steps, the little things. So, oh, you want to achieve this goal and that's 10 miles away and 5 years away. Well, but you got to start with the first step. So let's take that first little step and just bite off one little chunk at a time. And that confidence can build as you're kind of moving towards, as you're ticking off those small things to move towards those bigger things. Knowing my weaknesses and focusing on them will help me to grow confidence. As a strengths coach, that line just makes me ugh. Because, and we're finding more and more in both the world of psychology and the world of learning and development, that actually strengths-based development and not saying what's wrong with people and really focusing on that, it doesn't actually work. That actually by focusing on our weaknesses and constantly focusing on our weaknesses actually is to the detriment of the things we're already good at. And our weaknesses never really get much better because we're not naturally good at them. Now, I'm not saying we ignore our weaknesses, because if it's detrimental to our safety or to doing our job or whatever, then it is about, you know, how do we navigate that? It's not about ignoring them. But if primarily that in life and in our workplaces that we can focus on what people do well and find ways to create teams where there's good mix of strengths, or partner people together, or know that actually, yeah, Fiona does this really well, and oh, actually, you know, this is an area that's a bit of a blind spot for Fiona. So actually, but Orla does that really well. You know, bringing that together can actually, everyone excels, and it's good for well-being. We're more engaged in our work and that as well. So actually focusing on what isn't working and maybe our blind spots isn't really going to make them any better and isn't really going to help our confidence. I must be perfect before I feel confident. Well, yeah, nobody's perfect. So you will be waiting a while if you're waiting for that to feel confident, is all I'll say. Even though I do have to tell my 6-year-old daughter sometimes, yes, that she's perfect, even though the logical part of my brain is going, no, you're setting her up for. But, you know, she's 6. I'm just going to wait before I break that to her. But yeah, I mean, this pursuit of perfection often just crucifies us and stops us from doing anything. Yeah, there's I don't know if any of you have ever heard of Brené Brown before, so I love her work. She's this amazing researcher, talks a lot about vulnerability and courage and that. And what she talks about is, and it's a little bit in the failures and mistakes bit as well, and the perfection bit is, sometimes it's about just don't let done get in the way of, don't let perfect get in the way of done. Just start. And I have to often do that with myself when I have a task to do and I'm like so focused on getting the whole presentation right. Say I'm really putting together this presentation, I'm so focused on the final outcome being the best it can be that I don't even know where to start, and I just can't start. So I've started saying to myself, okay, I'm going to let myself, excuse my language, do a shitty first draft, because that's what she talks about, is, and accept that this very first draft that I spit out of the paper is going to be a mess, but it will get the ideas out of my head. And that's what everything in most, if we think about the biggest achievements in the world, whether it's musical performances, sporting performances, inventions, innovation, has generally come with a whole trail of failures, mistakes, of imperfections, of practice runs, and all of those things. So, you know, we don't need to be perfect to feel confident. We don't need to let our failures and mistakes to ruin our confidence. And then coming back to that one about criticism and feedback, so destroying your confidence. I will put a little asterisk in there. It does depend on how feedback and criticism is delivered. So if we're in leadership roles or we're in positions where we're giving people feedback, it's important to deliver feedback in a respectful way and in a way that, yeah, that's appropriate, of course. But as recipients of feedback, we have to take responsibility for being able to just take feedback on board and consider how relevant it is in our work and that. But again, it can sit separately from being confident in who we are and that we're learning. And the last one, I love the last one. Well, I don't, but if I become too confident, I will turn into a selfish narcissist. So no, you won't. But I find that actually this is very reflective of some of the cultural thinking here in New Zealand, and it's the same in Ireland, the whole tall poppy thing. Oh, well, that person's very confident, you know, that kind of thing. Oh, let's cut them down to size. So there's almost a level of confidence that if you're showing you're a bit too confident, oh, no, don't be doing that. And in Ireland, you might have heard me use the expression earlier, we might go, she's got often notions about herself. Yeah. Who does she think she is? Notions. Ask any Irish person, and it's the same thing. It's who do they think they are? But actually, what I've noticed is the people that are most truly confident are generally actually the most humble people that I know, because they don't have anything to prove, and they're generally just content in who they are and providing and creating space for others to do the same. So I just want to bust some of those myths first of all, that confidence is not any of those things. So what is it? Well, confidence, it's not something you have, it's something you create from within. It's a feeling, not something tangible. It's a belief we have based on our perception of the world, situation, and ourselves. So how we see the world, how we see the situation that we're in, and how we see ourselves in that situation is almost always the major impacts in our confidence. So, and when we know that, when we know, okay, well, actually, it's about how I see myself and how I'm seeing the world, then we can do something with that knowledge, and that can actually impact how we feel. And we don't have to wait for permission to do that, because it's something that is within our own control. Just grab my sip of brushes this moment. So first of all, I just want to talk about our perception of change. So how we perceive the change we're navigating. So, you know, how we perceive the change we're navigating, it matters, because it's directly connected to the level of confidence that we feel when we're navigating it. And it's also connected to our human stress response. And I find this stuff really interesting because I just want to talk a bit. So the first piece of practical bit I want to talk about is understanding our stress response and being able to reframe change. And as I say, yeah, how we perceive that change we're navigating matters. So our stress response, so when we encounter a stressful situation, often something, you know, where we're trying something new, or some situation where we're maybe even thinking about change, can make some people sweat and feel quite stressed. So we make too often really subconscious judgments. Now, the first one is we decide whether the situation is threatening. Now, the threat could be something like to our social standing, our values, our time, our reputation, as well as to our physical safety and our survival. So that's the first thing we do. So what's the threat? What's the level of the threat? And that happens quite subconsciously and really quickly. And the second thing we do is we judge whether we have the resources, or whether we think we have the resources to meet that perceived threat. How stressed we feel, or how far out of control we feel, depends on how well we feel we can meet the threat with the resources we have available. If you think about it, I see that quite visually as like, okay, I'm rating the threat is here, I'm rating my resources here. Oh, the gap is massive. Oh, Jesus. You know, there's a, you know, like the the confidence level plummets, I guess, because we see that gap to be much bigger. But those two things happen so quickly. You know, our brain is amazing, right? Our brain remembers patterns, it remembers stories and experiences from before. So it can just make a snap decision about something, and often we don't even challenge it. We just accept we just accept what it tells us first time. And that's why starting a new job, moving house, or parachuting is invigorating and anxiety for some and anxiety producing for others, because we all assess and perceive these threats and our ability to cope with them really differently. So to some of us, exactly the same threat that we've seen or that we've perceived, and the resources we have to assess it, it could be exactly the same, and we could have the same skills, resources, but you could be assessing it as, oh, that's fine, sure, that's no big deal. Whereas I'm just like, oh my God, you know, barely able to cope, like having a really, you know, lacking my confidence and really just shaking in the corner, you know. So there's a real opportunity there to really have a look at the situation that we're in and reframe it, whatever that change or that situation that we're in is, and actually ask ourselves, why are we feeling what we're feeling about this situation, and why? And really getting present and mindful to, you know, these judgments that happened really quickly. What if I'm just to slow that down and reframe this situation for a moment? So, you know, is it really a threat? Is this situation, this change, really a threat? Or, you know, is it scary, stressful, painful, unfair? Is it really a threat? Or, you know, with this time now to sit back and go, well, actually, this isn't really a threat at all to me. You know, this change, this experience is actually exciting. Or, you know, sometimes we decide to make a change in our personal lives around, I often hear people, we talk about it like, you know, running or going to the gym or changing how you're eating. You know, people will go, oh, I don't want to do that. Oh, I'm just doing this at the moment, or I should. And coming at it from a place of, it's stressful, it's painful, it's unfair, but yet we're choosing to do it. So if we can approach that change as a choice that we've made because we deserve to feel healthier, you know, from a place of self-worth rather than beating myself up with it, then it's going to be a much better experience. I'm going to feel much less stressed and anxious about that as well. And, you know, thinking about change, you know, is it an opportunity to learn and grow and try something new, even to the point of it's a game, you know, that's, you know, we're not here for too long, you know, is it really that serious, I guess, and just slowing down and asking ourselves that question, because I think we often take, and I do myself, you know, we often take some of the smallest things so seriously, and it's actually like, let's just step back and go, is this really, really serious thing after all? So what's the impact of all of that in our confidence? So just, you know, talking about understanding our stress response and actually reframing change. What's the impact? Well, my nana used to always say this anyway, the serenity prayer, and my mother as well, but it's always stuck with me. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And with the stress response stuff, we make that decision so quickly about the stuff that we can change and that we can't change, that it's about like challenging that first thought. So yeah, grant me the serenity, but once I've actually checked, are my thoughts really helping me, or is it just that initial response? And then once we do know what we can change, then yeah, doing something about that. And once we know what we can't, going, okay, yeah, maybe there's some emotions I need to deal with around that, and then just going, I need to accept this and reframe it for what it is, rather than, I guess, staying in a victim mindset. And that can be the case sometimes. You know, we just stay in, oh, this has just happened to me, and how do we reframe that to move forward? But by slowing down our thinking and getting really curious about that threat, we're able to take a more realistic view, and we can assess then if it's a threat at all. And then we're likely to be able to, if we assess that threat, we've taken that time to slow down and do that, and we've assessed that threat as actually that's much more down here. And actually my resources to deal with it are more down here as well. We've minimized, if not closed, that gap between the level of threat and our ability to manage it. And that's something that takes a bit of time to practice. But first of all, you need to know it and understand it. And if you understand the stress response and how that thinking happens, then over time, you can start to, it's like a muscle. you just practice that slowing down of what's going on in your mind, and noticing that, just gets better over time. As a leader, if you are in a leadership role, and you're able to understand that stress response and reframe change, then you can be calmer under pressure, assess the reality of risks, and support your team through times of change and uncertainty, and with confidence. So that's the first one. So I'm just thinking, I just wanted to give people a second, I'm just going to be quiet for like 10 or 20 seconds and just give you a chance to think about what you've just heard there. And if you've any questions or just some thoughts that you want to jot down before I race on to the next thing, do that now so that you haven't forgotten. Yeah, so I'm just going to give it like 10 or 20 seconds for people to do that before I move on to the next bit. Okay, I won't pause for too long there. Ideally, if we're all in the same room, it would be a case of have a think about it for a couple of seconds yourself and then have a chat to the person next to you, because it just gets a bit of conversation going. But unfortunately, we can't do that today. But yeah, I just want to give a bit of space for you to just go, okay, what was useful there? What maybe might be a question that I have or something I want to make a note of. So the next kind of practical part I want to talk about when it comes to navigating change with confidence is leverage your unique unfair advantage. So you're like, what's that? What's your unique unfair advantage? So your unique unfair advantage, it's the advantage that you uniquely and unfairly have over everyone else on the planet, and an acknowledgement and an acceptance that nobody, not one single person on the earth, has the same combination of qualities and parts that you have within you. Nobody. And it's also a set of tools that you actually have at your disposal to help you to navigate life. That often we maybe don't see and leverage. So there's 6 parts to your unique unfair advantage. I'm just going to run through each one. So first of all, our strengths and talents. So as a strengths coach, this is an area I'm very passionate about. But your talents are your naturally recurring patterns of thought, feeling, and behavior. And so they just come naturally to you. You might not even be able to name them, you might be just think a particular way or relate to people a particular way, something that just comes naturally. Whereas a strength then is being able to take a talent and harness the power of it and develop it from its raw form to a more mature state. So really understanding, okay, in this situation, this is how I can apply this talent in this way by combining it with some skills and knowledge that I have. So if you think about, there's, when you have ponamu, they take it and it's, initially really rough and all that around the edges, but by polishing it over time, it becomes, that it shines and it's smoother around the edges and that. And a colleague of mine uses that often as an analogy for developing your talents from that raw state to that more mature state. And the power in that we all probably know people, or maybe we see it in ourselves, there are things we're naturally really good at, but there are some times we probably could do with utilizing them a bit more, and other times we could do with utilizing them a bit less. And knowing that about a talent and being able to refine it and use it in that more matured way is a really great way to kind of, is a really great way to apply the knowledge about yourself. So your skills and knowledge, there's the obvious stuff like formal qualifications and education and that, and then you have probably your most recent employment, that kind of stuff. But I also encourage people to go back and have a look, go all the way back through your career, all the way back to like your first part-time jobs and stuff, and think about what's all the skills and knowledge that I've accumulated through those that I'm maybe still using now, but actually I take for granted because I use them in such a natural way that I don't even consider them, but I had to learn them and develop them at some point. And they may actually be something that's really unique to you. Thinking about any other kind of volunteer roles or unpaid roles that you've had in your life. What skills and knowledge have you accumulated from them? And when I say, I say volunteer roles and then I say unpaid roles, the unpaid stuff I probably more mean it's caring for others, being a parent, stay-at-home mother, a working mother, any of those things. But, you know, because I see a difference between there's volunteer and there's unpaid work. But it is important to acknowledge the skills and the knowledge that you've accumulated from that too, that make you who you are. And probably the last part is even, you know, involvement in your community and in sport, in hobbies. You know, do you play sport? Are you involved in the church? Are you involved in your kids' school? Are you involved in any other hobby related stuff? And what are the skills and knowledge that you bring from that? Maybe, you know, maybe you bring that ability to lead from playing sports, or, you know, you volunteer in a community organization, or you play chess and that gives you an ability to think differently, you know. So I guess just encouraging you to look at all the different ways that you can reflect on what skills and knowledge you have. So values. So values being like the principles that are really, principles or standards of behavior. So your judgment of what's important in life. And values often act like a compass. And so needle of compass kind of when you're making day-to-day decisions or major life decisions, often it's your values that will come into play around how you will make that decision and deciding what's important. And the values that you hold will probably change throughout your life, you know, maybe as you have kids or as your career changes, as you change. So, you know, it's kind of something to constantly reflect on as well. I guess, you know, when I talk about values, did you ever make a decision where immediately you almost felt something physical where you went, oh, I can't believe I did that? You know, you felt like I feel like sometimes when I make a decision, a positive one or a negative one, and it's aligned with or not aligned with my values, I almost feel it physically. It's in my bones. So sometimes it's really hard to name the values, you know, as words, but actually there's almost like a feeling. When you know it's something that you knew wasn't aligned with you as well. So knowing your values is really important. And because of course that's going to contribute how you show up in your work and how you show up in your life in general. So your life and cultural experiences, again, we've all had very different lives, we're all at very different ages and stages, and most of us probably, even if we're really close, we wouldn't know all of each other's life experiences. But there are probably some major ones in your life that have really shaped who you are now, and have maybe shaped some of your values as well. So these things are all interconnected, they don't sit in isolation. Like, for example, I talk about, you know, coming here on a working holiday visa, you know, over time now live here. I've been here 11 years. Okay, well, what does that say to me? Well, I'm pretty adaptable, you know, well able to stand on my own 2 feet, well able to make my own decisions. Don't always feel that way, but, you know, I know these things because I've navigated these life experiences. You know, I've kept a child alive for 6 years, so I can't be a bad mother. You know, those first couple of birthdays are all about the parents celebrating. Kept the child alive. We survived. But you know, like, I know that changed my whole perspective on life, and not just as being a mother, but actually how I show up in my work. And the type of work I want to do now has changed because of that over time. So it's really important to know, reflect on your life experiences and go, oh, well, how do they make me who I am? And how do they contribute to how I show up in the world now? Cultural experiences, similar but different, I guess, in that there are lots of different kind of cultural norms across a range of cultures that might not be normal to someone else. And that's why I often say, like, common sense isn't common. You know, because we've all had such different life experiences and cultural experiences. And even if we don't practice, I don't just mean people who we may label as I get my labeled with it as ethnic. We're talking about, we all have a culture. We were all raised in a place by certain people with certain religions and beliefs around us. So, you know, I'm not just talking about, you know, yeah, you know what I mean. It's everyone. We all have a culture and we all have beliefs that have been informed by that. So it's just thinking about what are the beliefs that I have from my cultural experiences, and how do they contribute to how I show up. And then the last bit is people and community. Because the first 5 there are all about pretty much our own experiences, you know, ourselves as individuals. The last one is, well, you know, we have significant relationships in our life. And even though we're very much individuals, we are also very much driven by human connection and being connected to other people, and we desire human connection. So the relationships that we have in our lives do often impact how we show up in the world. You know, you say, there's a quote around, you know, you're the sum of the 5 people you spend your most time with. And, you know, we can critically think about, you know, what people are saying around us, but often it can be just easier. We just go along with what's being said, or we're influenced by what people we love say. So I'm not saying that's a good or bad thing. I'm just saying it's to be aware of how does that influence us. So all of that brought together is about, first of all, gaining knowledge about yourself and going, actually, there's so much more to me than I give myself credit for. There's so much more to me that I bring to the world. So now that I know that, what do I do with that knowledge? So it's not saying that your unique unfair advantage, that every single bit of it is positive and great all the time. We all have bits of us that, you know, contribute to us maybe not making the best decisions, or maybe inform some biases that we have, or, you know, because of, so it's more, the knowledge is power, because then we know, we go, okay, well, now I can think about how I can apply this in my life, and how maybe it influences when things go the way I'd like them to go, and when things don't, because is there something that I'm contributing to that situation? But how that impacts your confidence is that, well, actually learning about, and not just, well, it's not just about knowing, as I said, you know, the ability to self-reflect and then intentionally apply that information is what's key. You know, it's not about, if I talk about our strengths or all of that stuff as volume, right? If it's all turned up loud all the time, then it's probably not going to be having a positive impact for ourselves or the people around us. It's more about how do we manage the volumes of how we show up in particular situations. It's kind of like authenticity, and I mention it here as well. People go, oh, you know, we hear a lot of talk about being authentic as a leader, and that. Authenticity doesn't mean like, you know, completely 100% being everything that you are the whole time. It's about being authentic and being aligned with yourself, but appropriately in certain situations. So it's not black or white, and it's the same with this. But knowing yourself and appreciating all aspects of yourself is always going to give you this foundation of kind of self-worth and self-confidence intrinsically, because the more you know yourself, the more authentic you can be. That feels good, and then others see that too, you know. So it's we've all had people in our lives, whether it's in work or in other areas, where we've seen they are continuously trying to be something they're not, and you can see that integrity gap, and it really is off-putting, particularly if it's someone in a position of influence, and you know, it's really hard work. It's really hard work, and it can often be one of the key causes of burnout as well, is kind of constantly trying to be something actually that we're not. So just to bear that in mind. As a leader, as I said, yeah, people can see the integrity of a leader being authentic, walks the talk, not just talks the talk, and also creates the culture where others feel psychologically safe to show up authentically too, and you know, bring who they are to work. And finally, you know, a leader who knows and plays to their strengths will develop a strengths-based culture of collaboration and communication, where everyone's contribution is valued. So, you know, it can be, you know, you bring your strengths, I bring my strengths. Oh yeah, we put you two together to do that, and everyone feels like they can contribute. So that's the last bit of that one. So again, I'll just kind of pause there for about 20 seconds. That is, if there's anything you want to make a note of, or just taking a moment to pause and think. And before I start rabbiting on again. Okay, I won't hang around too long, but just, you know, on that last point as well, and I've made a note afterwards, you know, that whole idea of everyone's unique contribution is valued. We hear so much every day now about in workplaces about diversity and inclusion. And, you know, if everyone feels valued, and a leader is demonstrating that different kinds of people are valued, you know, it's not always, you know, it's not all, you know, that the people, there are some people that are really good in that more strategic thinking space. There are others that more the action, more about the execution bit. So it's knowing where can we place different people to get the best out of them, and knowing that value is so important. So the next one, and the third one we're going to talk about, is own your well-being and performance. and that is conscious personal leadership. So first of all, leadership is not just about titles. So we all have opportunities every day when we wake up to just lead from where we are. And that's in leading ourselves, could be with our partner and our kids, could be, you know, in our communities, if we're involved in our communities and local community organizations, in our workplaces, but not just if we have the word leader in our title. You know, there's an element of leadership involved if it's with clients, if it's with colleagues. Sometimes it's leading up the chain and influencing others as well. So, and I often see people, you know, almost waiting for an invitation to kind of demonstrate just decent kind of, well, actually not decent, but demonstrate behaviors that they would expect from a leader, but not stepping into that because they don't have the title of leader. Like, there are opportunities to demonstrate leadership qualities regardless of our title. And then the whole concept of personal leadership is really about the choices that we make that influence how we show up in the world and influence our well-being and performance. Because by those choices and by those actions, the outcomes are on ourselves. So, you know, we're leading ourselves in making those choices and doing the things that we do. And to be conscious then, well, obviously we all know what unconscious means, but to be conscious, to be awake, to be aware, to be intentional, to just take actually responsibility for our actions and our choices, and the impact they have on ourselves and the people around us. So if we think about conscious personal leadership then, so I've just developed a model here I'm just going to share with you. So it is inspired by two different models that I've kind of studied over the years. And first one is Te Whare Tapawa, which is the Maori health model. And then the second one is the PERMA model, which is a model from positive psychology. So with Te Whare Tapawa, it's those four outside pieces, which are in Te Whare Tapawa. It's like a whare, a house, and they're the four walls, and it's talking about your well-being. And so choosing, I'll come back to the model in a second. I kind of jumped ahead too quick, sorry. So, but to choose these conscious personal leadership is to choose ways of doing, so they're those bits on the outside, and then internal ways of being that positively impact your well-being and performance. So it's how you lead yourself. So yeah, as I say, those four ways of the doing is the outside bits: physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, mental and emotional, social and spiritual. And then the internal ways of being, it's really much more in here. It's your self-worth, self-talk, self-compassion. So just to give a couple of examples, I guess, of each one, you know, the physical one is usually obvious, you know, physical well-being and performance. Oh yeah, exercise and nutrition, that kind of stuff. But I often say to people as well, yeah, it's that, but it's also going to the dentist when you should. It's go to the doctor and get a picture of your health, you know, so that if you do get unwell, they know what, you know, you might go. Some of us here some are really young here, and they're like, look at me, I don't need to do that. Tell you now, do it. I'm a bit older, I know. But yeah, you know, what does a picture of health look like for you, so that maybe if you're not doing so well, there's something to compare against. Get a massage, stretch after running, or that catches up with you too. But all of that stuff is actually being proactively caring for our physical well-being, and thinking about even our, like in workplace, thinking about desk setup. During COVID, how were we all? I was sitting on a beanbag on the floor in our bedroom because we were living in a 2-bedroom flat, like, you know, but your seating, you know, all of that kind of stuff, that's all your physical well-being stuff. Yeah, so just a couple of examples there, but it's usually the most obvious one. Mental and emotional. So I guess the relationship between the two is massive. So I talked about earlier, when you feel nervous about something, or, you know, the negative self-talk starts or something, what usually happens is you feel something physically first. It might be in your stomach, it might be in your chest, it might be in your throat. And that's usually driven by our emotions and by our feelings. And our brain then is really clever and it's connected to our emotions and feelings and goes, I remember that feeling. I remember that sensation. That's related to a time when blah, 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 blah. And then the story starts. But that reaction happens so fast that we just hear the thinking. Like, you know, we feel the feeling, but like it's the thinking that we hear. and we don't really notice the feeling bit so much, or even that they're related. And so there's real power in, that's what mindfulness practice does, is slows down your ability to notice and widen that time gap, so you can go, oh, actually, hang on a second, I can catch that thinking, and just slows that down. I will say that as someone who meditates, usually when I'm sitting there meditating for the whole 10 minutes, I'm just like, what are we having for dinner? No, 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 no. This is waste time. But what I have noticed is it's at the times when that happens that I notice that I go, oh, I've slowed that right down. So usually it's not, so if you are trying to meditate and you're thinking all the time, that's fine. That's normal. What matters is that, you know, when every time you notice, you just go up back to the breath, and that could be every second of that 10 minutes. But it's like a muscle. It really is. It's when you're in those moments where that reaction happens, that your ability to slow things down happens. But again, now you have the knowledge. The next time you feel something and you have that thought, you can kind of catch the thought and go, is that true? Is that really true, or is that just, thank you, brain, really appreciate that. I know you're trying to protect me, but sometimes you're wrong. Give it a name. I have a friend that calls hers Brian. I don't know why. But anyway, so one practical way I find really helps that is journaling, you know, just after the fact, or, you know, it's just, and it doesn't have to be tidy, it can be the back of an envelope, just dumping it all out there and going, I was feeling this way, and I was thinking this, and what did I end up doing? So think about that chain: feel, think, act. Social does not mean being out every night of the week. Sometimes it means actually saying, no, I need a bit of me time. What are the important relationships in your life, and how do you strengthen those relationships is really what that's about. It's not necessarily about being a social butterfly. So I would often say, I remember someone saying to me once, oh, why do you like to help, you know, so and so? And I was like, oh, because it feels good. Oh, well, do you let yourself be helped? Do you ask for help? I'm like, no. And, well, you're depriving the people in your life from that same feeling that you enjoy feeling. And oh, mic drop. She's absolutely right. Like, you know, so from the people that love us, we often don't ask them for help, but we're depriving them of that same feeling that we get when we help them, you know, and an opportunity to strengthen a relationship. And then the last one, spiritual, may mean religion, may mean meditation again, but may also mean being out in nature, being connected to something bigger than ourselves. I'd throw sport and music in there as well, because like I've played sport all my life, I've been in the crowds, watching sport, and I don't know if you've ever had the experience where you're suddenly dancing with a stranger or hugging the person next to you that you don't know, because you're just connected by the energy of something that you just can't feel or touch. And to me, that's spiritual as well. You know, spirituality is just something that you can feel, but you're not quite sure what it is. And then the bits at the center, you know, your self-worth. How do you perceive your self-worth? Is it connected to everything that you achieve all day, every day? Or do you just wake up in the morning and go, you know what, I'm a worthy human being just the way I am, and whatever I achieve today, I'll still be as worthy at the end of the day. We probably say it to our children or to our friends or to our loved ones, but we don't say it to ourselves most of the time. And then that's where the self-compassion comes in. How can we be as compassionate with ourselves as we are with others, which then connects into our self-talk. So just really addressing each of those things. If we can look at those things and we can just find little ways to, with each of them, just do little things that can kind of better contribute to each aspect, then we have increased resilience. We are going to be more empowered. We're going to have more confidence and clarity to kind of choose and create the life we want. And think about the times when you are not feeling so good. So when your well-being is a bit low, what is the impact on those times on your confidence, on your resilience, on your mood, your performance at work, your relationships? You know, like how our well-being, how we're actually feeling on a particular time, you know, in my experience anyway, generally affects all of those things as well. How you do anything is how you do everything. So having a bit of a think about if this is how I lead myself, how does that reflect in how I interact with others? I might say, you know, is there a correlation there? Just, you know, thinking about how well we may be. If that's what I'm thinking about myself, is that what I'm really thinking about other people? Just maybe having a think about that. And again, you know, if you're in a leadership role, your choices and actions impact your team and colleagues, and people see it. So if you're someone that's telling people to take their well-being seriously, and you're someone that looks like you're falling over with exhaustion and you're not walking the talk yourself, people are, regardless of what you tell them, they're going to feel the need to be replying to emails at 3 a.m. just like you're sending them at 3 a.m. So what you do as a leader also sets the tone for what others do. Yeah, it's the walk, talk the talk thing again, right? So that is that one. Again, I'm just going to pause there for about 20 seconds and then I've kind of got one more to talk through. And yeah, so just give you a moment to have a think or make a note or a question. Let's get into it. Please. All right, so let's crack on to the fourth kind of practical way that we can be a bit more confident when we're navigating change. To be honest, I say that it's navigating change, but really life is so uncertain and constantly changing anyway, that really is just being more confident in navigating life. But, you know, normally the title is a bit more catchy. Navigate change with confidence, navigate life with confidence. It was a bit generic. Yeah, so the last bit I want to talk about is, I want to talk about get clear and curious. So, and what do I mean by that? So I want to talk about expectations. Expectations, they are the root of all heartache. Well, unrealistic and unreasonable ones are. I just want you to take a moment to consider all the expectations you put on yourself in your day-to-day life. And not to mind when you're navigating change, but there are probably a whole heap of expectations you have in yourself that you've never even acknowledged. Not of mind written them down or having said them out loud. They're all in here. They're all inside, in between your ears there. And generally, I find that expectations are unclear, unchecked, unrealistic, and unchallenged. And sometimes, as I say, completely we're oblivious to them. Now, you might be saying, oh no, I don't really have any expectations on myself. Well, hold your horses, because I think about every time you say the words should and must to yourself. Because every time you say the words should and must to yourself, you are putting expectations on yourself. And I bet you can think of a whole heap now, and some of them might be related to how you are as a parent, as a mother, as a colleague, as a partner, how you should be doing in your new role, how you should be just doing in your current role, how you should be going to the gym, how you must do X, Y, and Z for this person and that person, and how, we should catch up. You know, like I have friends that say that to me all the time, we should catch up. I'm like, yeah, I don't believe it anymore. Because it never happens. But think about every time you feel when you use those words, should and must. Like, I know for me, there's a guilt straight away, because I know deep down it's not really going to happen, and I'm just trying to make myself feel better. Or I'm too afraid to say no, you know, and actually make a choice. But I'm not saying that having expectations is wrong. Not at all. But what I am saying is that we keep piling them up and they're causing negative feelings for you. Then we need to get curious about them. Because this mounting pile of unclear and unchecked expectations, it's kind of like hoarding a little bit. There's a room there in the back of your mind with all the expectations. They're all in there, and we've shoved the door closed, but we know it's there. Yeah, I'm seeing all the smiles here, and I'm sure there's probably a few of you smiling there as you're watching as well. But look, I just want you to ask yourself, are these expectations realistic, and are they achievable, and what's the purpose of them? And do you keep adding more and more shoulds and musts, and then they end up in guilt and shame, because there's so many that you can't meet them all. But if we choose, like, imagine if we could change every time we said should to choose. I choose to go to the gym, or I choose to whatever. And if you don't say it. You know, it's fine. But like, then but it's your choice, and then change that language. Language is just so powerful. But by getting clear and curious around our expectations and checking if they're realistic and achievable, if there are things we really want to do, we can do things like, you know, put some structure around them. And maybe that's like putting them in our calendar, or actually saying, I'm not doing that anymore, but making a decision. And that's what I mean by structure. Structure is kind of putting is kind of putting it in a box or putting, you know, lines around it, like creating, it might be, if it's something like, I should go to the gym, well, okay, well, let's actually sit down and say why you want to go to the gym, and actually put a goal in place and make it easier for yourself to go to the gym if you really want to. You know, maybe it needs to go on your calendar every week, or maybe you need an accountability buddy. But, you know, so structure is the external stuff that I'm talking about, so that you can put a, structure, that's what I said, in place. But so how does that impact on our confidence? Well, again, all those expectations floating around there are all just so unclear. They're just, and there's a lot of almost negative emotion associated with them as well. Whereas I like to think that if we get curious about them and we go, look, I'm either doing them or I'm not, and if I am, this is how I'm going to do them, then we can have this kind of clear strategy. And I guess it gives, I like to call it this kind of strong structural foundation, gives us this feeling of confidence. By deciding what you're doing, you're also deciding what you're not doing. I don't know about you, but if you've ever been agonizing over a decision, and then all of a sudden, well, not all of a sudden, you make that decision, there's just even if like, just, you know, it's just the making of a decision. And I think the original meaning of the word decision, I think this was at Brené Brown as well, she was talking about that to decide comes from the Latin words to cut away. So by making a decision, you're cutting away the unclearness, the lack of clarity that was there. So there's a freeing there. Whereas all of those expectations that are unchallenged and unchecked, they're doing the complete opposite. So again, back to then on the leader side of things, God, I do love my Brené Brown stuff. I've quoted her a lot today. But, and this is the same actually as what I was saying about if you were doing this for yourself. Clear is kind, unclear is unkind. So if you're being unclear with yourself constantly, then you're going to be setting yourself up for failure, and you keep setting a bar so high that you can't reach. It's going to keep damaging your confidence. It's going to have a negative impact on your well-being as well. And that's the same if we're in leadership roles. So, you know, people say, oh, I don't want to micromanage. There's a difference between micromanaging and being really clear about expectations and outcomes, and being clear and checking with people. Do they have everything they need to do that, to do the job that they need to? Using shoulds with colleagues and team members, again, making assumptions. And I said this earlier, common sense is not common due to different life experiences. We're in such a diverse world now, you know, to use that term. Just, and I do myself, look, we all do that, but you know, we need to just challenge ourselves a bit more around what that means. And again, clarity of expectations and needs sets everyone up for success. So that's that last one. So again, I'm just going to pause for about 10 seconds, 10, 20 seconds there again. And then there's just a couple of other things I want to run through, and then I'm done. So give you a moment to just take that last little bit in. Okay, so just a quick summary of those four. So understanding your stress response and reframing change, leverage your unique unfair advantage, own your well-being and performance, which is your conscious personal leadership, and get clear and curious. So this is your expectation. So I have provided a PDF of this to Orla, so she can circulate it around to everyone as well. And my email and stuff is on there. So if you have any questions, just email me. I really don't mind at all. But from a practical perspective, so, you know, I've shown you all that stuff. It's like, okay, how can you apply or build your capacity for this stuff? So things like any of the models that are there, they're all going to be in the presentation. Just taking some time to just reflect using any of those and just kind of going, okay, well, what do I do in this area? What do I do in this area? And just start building that bigger picture of knowledge for yourself. Because then once you accumulate that knowledge, then you can do something with it. Journaling to reframe, change, and develop awareness of that stress response, whether it's after the fact, something's happened and you went, instead of giving yourself a hard time, go, okay, well, do you know what, I'm just going to do something about this now. I'm going to learn about it. So I'm just going to write all down what happened, what I thought, what I felt. Okay, now I understand it a bit better. Well, next time, you know, I'm going to maybe try this. So next time I'll be a little teeny weeny bit more aware. And then the next time I'm another bit more aware. And that awareness just builds. Personally, I love journaling when I get overwhelmed, and I know when I haven't, like when I get overwhelmed is really helpful, but I should be doing it more. See, I choose to do, I try to choose to do it more often. See, fail. I know, and that's okay because I'm just confident. Yeah, so no, journaling, I do find it really useful. When I do it regularly, kind of like the meditation, it has a greater impact. However, what I do find is in those times where I'm quite overwhelmed and I know I need it most, that's when I kind of resist it. But I choose to do it then and go 5 minutes. And I set the timer on the phone. I turn the phone upside down and go, it will tell me when it's done. And I can do anything for 5 minutes. And I just start writing. And my goodness, the stuff that comes out of my brain, I go, okay, I need to burn that. I believe I was thinking that. But I've got that whole new perspective. Because I will tell you, I'm sure we've all experienced it. When it's in our heads, what's in our heads and what actually would come out of our mouth if we tell someone else or if we write about it can be completely different. I like to use the analogy of the dryer. If you ever try to empty the dryer when it's full, one item at a time, you can't. It's all knotted up. You know, oh, there's arms of this stuck with the legs of this. And it's like that with my thoughts when my head is full. You know, I can't pick out one at a time and deal with them. I need to dump them all out into the basket and then I can sort through them in a much more kind of calmer way because my head is empty. But I just find it awesome. And even if, you know, what I find the timer thing is really helpful as well. I can do anything for 5 minutes. I can do anything for 5 minutes and then I can just turn over the phone and it will buzz. And yeah. Other ways to kind of build that knowledge, you know, with friends, family and colleagues that, you know, that you trust and getting some 360 feedback just on what other people observe. I have a bit of sales pitch there, but get some Clifton Strengths coaching to understand and leverage your natural talents. You can just start to pick up some strategies for kind of developing your vision for the future and setting some goals. Actually, how do I track what are the things I want to achieve and where am I tracking that? Or am I tracking it at all, or is it all just in my head? And you know, so just think about how do you think about what you want for the future? And if you don't have any goals, well, that's fine too. But if you do, and you're putting expectations on yourself, then I would challenge you to do that. And then just coaching in general, or talking to someone who is, you know, a manager, a leader, a friend, a peer, who you've primed to say, I don't need advice. You know, I'm literally just venting here. Or maybe they're asking questions just, rather than, because you might not want fixing, it's just sometimes to be heard. And I often find like coaching is about holding up that mirror for you. And it's not about actually giving advice. It's about holding up that mirror so you get a new perspective and you can self-reflect, as well as then giving you support and accountability to move forward. Which, regardless of what you choose, nothing will change unless you are willing to kind of look inside yourself and develop that self-awareness and then do something with the knowledge, because knowing isn't enough. Knowing, you know, you could say to people, oh, they're like, yeah, I know. Now, what does I know mean? Does it mean that person is going to go do something? Usually I know means, yeah, I know. And they just go do nothing. It's like there's nothing going to change. That's what I'm saying about the difference between knowing and doing. So people say knowledge is power. I call it bull. It's not, because on its own it isn't. Knowledge and action, and preferably some accountability, whether that's a friend or a peer or something, that's where the power is in really shifting and making change, whether that's in being more confident or moving towards a goal or anything. You know, knowing just won't create any change. So that's it. So that's my presentation. I would love to hear any questions. I think if there's anything maybe from the online.
There's no online questions yet. So if anybody has any questions, please pop them up. But you do have someone else who loves Brené Brown.
Yay!
Another fan. Working on Dare to Lead with their team. Highly recommend.
Oh, yeah. Brilliant.
So you've got a friend there, Fiona.
Oh, I love, yeah. So And if you haven't heard of her, do look her up. Brené Brown, Brene Brown, Brown. There's actually a documentary on Netflix called The Call to Courage. She's an American woman, a researcher, and yeah, I find her stuff great. She also has a podcast if you'd like to learn that way as well. So addresses some really big topics around leadership, around vulnerability, around courage, and a lot around, particularly now, around equity, around one of her recent podcasts was that she had two women on that had written an article on Harvard Business Review about stop telling women they have imposter syndrome, because basically the more we're telling women they have imposter syndrome, the more they're believing they have imposter syndrome. And that actually when imposter syndrome was created as a thing, and through the studies that were done like 30, 40 years ago initially, it wasn't considering all of the stuff around bias in the workplace, around the challenge around gender-based bias and all of that. So there's, they've really opened up a big conversation about imposter syndrome, and that actually, by calling it a syndrome, we're actually making it even worse and harder for people to believe that they're just having nerves. So anyway, ramble. So maybe, yeah.
So it was fantastic, Fiona. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. I have so many notes written here.
Well, I'd love to hear, like, if you don't have questions, what I'd really be curious to hear, just to have like a little chat between us, and I know there's a few online there as well, but like, you know, if you have a question, great, but if you don't have a question, I'd love to just hear what's one or two key things that you found meaningful or thought-provoking, because who knows then what someone else might have found. That's what I'd be curious about to hear, if you don't have a question.
I think what's awesome is that was a really good follow-on discussion from the last one event that we had not long ago, which was about changing your thoughts. And it's something I've been trying a whole lot to try and work out, because it's in the last couple of months you realise how much negative talk you give yourself, and how much expectation you put on yourself without really even realizing. But the should and could thing, oh my gosh. Terrible.
Yeah. And I think by even just acknowledging, like you say, that pause, like, so you start to, when you think about your thoughts, like as you're thinking them, you're like, is that helpful or harmful? All of a sudden you can actually change the narrative in your head to be quite different. And it's only by realizing how you speak to yourself in your head that you can do that, and you realize how terribly you speak to yourself, like I have over the years.
I was told not long ago to create space between your thought and the action, and it's like visualizing the space between you, which is 5 seconds, which nobody notices, but gives you like that time to, like you say, to refresh how you're going to actually portray yourself. Like typically it's like you've expected something and it hasn't gone right, but picture that space in between and move into it how you
One of the things that that I try to do, but I've kind of fallen into a bit of a trap, is, you know, the way I read something a while ago about how you'd never miss a work meeting, you know, like you prioritize that, but you don't prioritize your own time. So somebody suggested, you know, the things that you feel that you choose to do, not should do, but choose to do, put them into your calendar. And that was great. But then when I'd miss a personal thing, I'd get like really, like almost attack myself. I'd be like, oh, for God's sake, you're putting yourself, you know, so it's should have done it. But it's like, I wonder where that line is of holding yourself accountable, but not having the expectations so high. It's and I suppose it changes for everybody, really, doesn't it? But it's, I haven't quite got that happy medium yet.
I think though it's kind of like the perfect thing. It's not a destination. You don't get there and you're there, because again, we change and our lives change and our priorities will change, and something comes up. So it is a constant piece of work, or a constant, but it's a constant piece of work that's actually a pleasure to do. But what we do is we end up reframing it as a constant piece of work that's misery. And I guess, so I think an acceptance that it's a journey, and that we're constant, you know, as long as we're alive, we're going to be on that journey, that we're never, you know, it's like the only destination is death. you know, sorry, you know, but you know, it's not perfection. It's not, right, I've got that now, because as soon as we get to the thing that we wanted, whether it's the next job or the relationship, we want the next thing. So, and that's hard, you know. I'm worded exactly the same way, you know. Just because I know this stuff does not mean I don't do this stuff too. I do. I guess I've found that I've gotten better at recognizing it and shifting it, and I guess I've just picked up more tools along the way around that. But I think, yeah, there's an acceptance that it's life, like that whole thing is life, and but I think the acceptance and then the self-compassion really is massive. It really, really is. There's a woman called Kristen Neff, it's her name, Kristinnneff. She does a lot of work. She's a website, selfcompassion.org. There are meditations, there are journaling prompts and all of that, just to help you practice self-compassion. And just even a simple one is, you know, what would you say to your own best friend in this situation? And it can be quite emotional to think that way. Or even, if you really want to have a cry about it, is like, if you think about, you look in the mirror and you think about that little boy or girl that you were, you know, once, well, you're still that little boy or girl inside, and would you speak to them the way you're speaking to yourself? You know, or what would you say to them to show them that love and compassion that you deserve to be shown to, because you're only human, right? So yeah, that's probably what I'd say. Acceptance and self-compassion, that it isn't a destination.
I also want to thank you for, I've always been told that you're a human being, not a human doing, and it's resonated really well with me, but that diagram that you put up, like in terms of the external ways of doing and internal ways of being, that actually just helped really clearly articulate actually what those two differentiate. Because it's very sort of like human being portrayed as sitting down on the couch and doing nothing, but actually there's a lot to it that you can still do in that space. So it's great.
Yeah, being doesn't just mean sitting in your still nothing.
No,
I think it's just,
amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was incredible.
Really great. Thank you.
Wow, okay.
Another thank you from a comment online.
Oh, yeah.
I enjoyed the part about working with your strengths rather than taking up your energy with working on your weaknesses, which I think was really good as well. Yeah, because sometimes we focus on, you know, the 10% that we're really, really bad at, rather than, wait a minute, look at all these things that we're actually really good at. So we're all going to be super confident after this.
I'll be back to check in. What about this end? This end, they're hogging now here.
Yeah.
I don't know. But like, is there any? What would you say was something that you found useful or interesting, or?
Oh, just on the working on your, like, not sticking with your strengths, but working on your strengths. It sort of fits in with the fact that sometimes the most confident people are actually really humble, because they recognize other people's strengths as well, and sort of piecing them together. The fact you can be confident in your own strengths actually helps you appreciate other people's strengths as well.
Be a pretty boring world if we're all the same.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, but yet there's this aspiration for everyone to be the same. It's like,
Also, like, I'm not sure how you worded in your text, but it was like saying, maybe for me it's normal, but for someone else it's not, because everyone has their own culture, but also experience and stuff like that. So yeah. So actually also to know what your neighbor is going through as well. It's if you don't talk, you don't know.
Exactly.
That common sense is not common.
Yeah.
You're so bad about it. So I say to my kids all the time. Common sense.
That's different.
It's like that team.
You're allowed to say something completely different to your shit. I might be recorded. But
Perfect. Well, we'll leave it there. And as Fiona said, we have the presentation in PDF, so we can circulate it to everybody that attended. And thanks for everybody tuning in online, and we hope to see you in person next time. It'd be lovely. And a big thank you to Fiona. That was absolutely fantastic.
Oh, thank you for the goodness.
Not
You make me look bad.
Never.
Never. Thank
Just
you.
hang up here. Thanks so much.
I wish they had more people like you come into the schools. Like, I think